My name is Cassandra Williams, and I'm 32 years old. 3 days ago, I returned from a nursing conference in Chicago, expecting to find my 8-year-old son Tyler safe with my family. Instead, I discovered something that would shatter my world forever. The house was eerily quiet when I walked through the front door, calling Tyler's name with no response. His bedroom was empty, bed unmade, toys scattered everywhere like he'd vanished mid-play. Then I heard it, a faint voice calling Mommy from somewhere below. Following the sound, I found our basement door locked from the outside with a heavy padlock I'd never seen before. Before we dive into this nightmare that no mother should ever face, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button if you're ready to hear how a family can betray their own blood, and don't forget to subscribe because this story will show you just how far some people will go to destroy the ones they claim to love. What happened next would reveal a conspiracy so twisted, I never could have imagined my own family capable of such cruelty. The weight of Tyler's trembling body in my arms as I carried him up from that basement will haunt me forever. My son, my precious boy who never caused trouble for anyone, had been locked in darkness for 2 full days while I attended what I thought was an important career development conference in Chicago. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was learning to care for other people's families, my own family was destroying mine. Being a single mother had never been easy, especially after Tyler's father walked out when Tyler was just 2 years old. James couldn't handle the responsibility, couldn't handle the sleepless nights and endless worries that come with raising a child. I'd been managing on my own for 6 years, working double shifts at Memorial Hospital to make ends meet, and my family had always positioned themselves as my support system. My mother Brenda would often say, "Cassie, honey, we're all you've got. Family sticks together no matter what." How those words would come back to mock me. When the opportunity came to attend the Advanced Pediatric Care Conference in Chicago, I hesitated. 3 days away from Tyler felt like an eternity, but the certification would mean a promotion and better financial security for us both. Brenda insisted on taking care of Tyler, bringing my brother Derek, his wife Vanessa, and my uncle Frank into the arrangement. "It takes a village," she'd said with that smile that I now realize masked something much darker. "We'll make it a fun weekend for Tyler. He'll be so busy with his cousins he won't even miss you." The first sign that something was wrong should have been Tyler's reluctance when I explained the arrangement. Usually excited about spending time with his grandmother, this time he seemed subdued, almost fearful. "Do you have to go, Mommy?" he'd asked, clinging to my scrubs after I got home from work the night before my departure. "Can I come with you?" I dismissed his concerns as normal separation anxiety, kissing his forehead and promising to bring him something special from Chicago. The basement where I found Tyler was cold, damp, and dark except for a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. There was a mattress on the concrete floor, stained and musty, with a thin blanket that looked like it hadn't been washed in years. A plastic bucket sat in the corner, serving as his bathroom, and the smell made my stomach turn. Tyler's lips were cracked from dehydration, his clothes dirty and too big for his shrinking frame. When I asked him when he'd last eaten, he whispered, "Grandma brought me crackers yesterday morning." The evidence of the party upstairs was everywhere. Empty beer bottles covered the kitchen counters, pizza boxes were stacked by the overflowing trash can, and red Solo cups littered the living room floor. Confetti was ground into the carpet, and the coffee table bore the ring stains of dozens of drinks. The stereo system was still plugged in, extension cords running to outdoor speakers that had obviously blasted music loud enough to cover any sounds Tyler might have made from below. Racing to the emergency room with Tyler in my car, I tried to piece together what had happened. He kept whispering fragments between sobs. "They said you didn't want me anymore, Mommy. Uncle Derek said you were never coming back. Grandma said I was too much trouble." Each word felt like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stay calm for his sake. "That's not true, baby. Mommy will never leave you. Never." At the hospital, Dr. Sarah Chin examined Tyler with a thoroughness that comes from years of recognizing abuse. She found signs of severe dehydration, mild malnutrition, and what she clinically termed psychological distress consistent with traumatic isolation. When she pulled me aside, her expression was grave. "Mrs. Williams, I'm required by law to report suspected child endangerment." The physical evidence combined with Tyler's emotional state suggests intentional neglect at minimum. My first instinct was to protect my family, to find some explanation that didn't involve the people who'd raised me deliberately harming my son. It might have been an accident, I heard myself saying. Maybe they didn't realize he was down there. Maybe the lock was. But even as I spoke the words, I knew they were lies. Tyler had told me enough fragments to know this was deliberate. When I confronted Brenda that evening, finding her calmly watching television in her living room as if nothing had happened, her reaction told me everything I needed to know. No shock, no horror at what Tyler had endured, just cold defensiveness. "That boy has an active imagination," she said without looking away from the screen. "You know how he exaggerates everything. He was perfectly fine, just got himself worked up over nothing." The casual way she dismissed Tyler's trauma, the complete lack of concern for his well-being, was perhaps more chilling than the original crime. This wasn't an accident or a moment of poor judgment. This was calculated cruelty from someone who was supposed to love and protect my child. As I stood in that living room where Tyler had played countless times as a toddler, I realized I was looking at a stranger, wearing my mother's face. Sleep became impossible that night as Tyler alternated between nightmares and clinging to me in terror every time I tried to move away from his bed. Each time he'd wake up screaming, "Don't lock me up again, Mommy. I'll be good." My resolve to uncover the truth grew stronger. By dawn, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop, determined to piece together exactly what had happened during those 3 days. Social media became my first weapon in the quest for truth. It amazed me how people could commit terrible acts and then proudly document their celebrations online. Derek's Facebook page was a treasure trove of evidence, with photos posted throughout the weekend showing him, Vanessa, Uncle Frank, and at least a dozen other people laughing, drinking, and having what Derek captioned as epic family party weekend. The timestamps were damning, showing posts every few hours from Friday evening through Sunday night, proving they were actively partying while Tyler suffered below. One photo particularly caught my attention. Posted at 2 in the morning on Saturday, it showed Derek holding a beer bottle high in a toast, with Vanessa laughing beside him and Frank playing some kind of drinking game in the background. The caption read, "When the cat's away, the mice will play. Best weekend ever." The callous celebration happening directly above my trapped son made my blood run cold. Vanessa's Instagram told an even more detailed story. Her obsession with documenting every moment of her life had inadvertently created a timeline that would become crucial evidence. Photo after photo showed the progression of the party, with people arriving Friday night, the festivities continuing all day Saturday, and the celebration extending well into Sunday evening. Not once did any of these posts mention Tyler or show any concern for his whereabouts. My neighbor Mrs. Patterson proved to be an unexpected ally when I knocked on her door Monday evening. A retired teacher in her 70s, she'd always been observant about neighborhood activities. "Oh, honey," she said when I asked about the weekend, "that was quite the commotion. Cars coming and going all hours, music so loud I had to close my windows. I almost called the police Saturday night but figured it was just family fun." Her security camera, installed after a break in the previous year, had captured much of the activity, and she was more than willing to share the footage. The security video painted a picture of calculated deception. It showed Derek arriving Friday evening with several cases of beer, followed by Vanessa and Frank with what looked like party supplies. Throughout the weekend, people came and went, clearly treating the house like a party venue rather than a home where a child was supposedly being cared for. Most telling was the footage from Sunday afternoon, showing Derek and Frank moving something heavy down the basement stairs. The timestamp read 3:30 p.m., just hours before my scheduled return. Getting Tyler to open up about his ordeal required patience and gentleness. Child psychologists recommend letting traumatized children share their experiences at their own pace, and Tyler's revelations came in fragments over several days. Sitting with him during his baths, the only time he seemed to feel safe enough to talk, he began to piece together the timeline of his imprisonment. They took me downstairs Friday night after the people started coming, he whispered, playing with his bath toys, but not really seeing them. Uncle Derek said you called and said you didn't want me anymore. He said you were starting a new family in Chicago, and I was too much trouble. The sophisticated cruelty of these lies, designed to break an 8-year-old spirit, revealed a level of psychological manipulation I hadn't imagined my family capable of. Tyler's account of his time in the basement grew more detailed as the days passed. He described being brought crackers and a small cup of water once a day, usually by Frank, who would tell him that his real family didn't want him anymore. The psychological torture was as systematic as the physical deprivation. They convinced my son that I had abandoned him willingly, that his imprisonment was somehow his own fault for being difficult. The neighbor's security footage proved invaluable when I discovered it had captured audio as well as video. The sound of loud music and laughter was clearly audible, punctuated by the occasional sound of someone shouting, "Turn it up," or "This is the best party ever." The callousness was breathtaking. While my son cried alone in a cold basement, believing he'd been abandoned forever, the people who were supposed to protect him were celebrating upstairs. Armed with this evidence, I returned to confront Brenda, this time bringing printed screenshots and a copy of the security footage on my phone. I expected denial, but what I got was something worse. Cold justification. "He needed to learn," she said, looking at the photos without a trace of shame. "You're too soft on him, Cassie. That boy needed some discipline, and sometimes discipline means learning hard lessons." The word discipline, spoken in relation to locking a terrified child in a basement for days, felt like blasphemy. This wasn't discipline, it was torture. But Brenda's use of the word revealed something important about how she viewed Tyler and, by extension, how she viewed me as a mother. In her mind, she'd been correcting my parenting failures, teaching Tyler lessons she felt I was too weak to teach myself. When Derek arrived at his mother's house while I was still there, his reaction confirmed that this had been planned, not spontaneous. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said, not even attempting to deny what had happened. "The kid is fine. He's being dramatic, just like always. Maybe if you'd raised him right, he wouldn't be so soft." His casual dismissal of Tyler's trauma, combined with his criticism of my parenting, revealed the depth of their contempt for both of us. The pieces were starting to come together, but I sensed this conspiracy ran deeper than a weekend of poor judgment. The coordination between Derek, Brenda, and Frank, the systematic psychological manipulation of Tyler, and their complete lack of remorse suggested this was part of a larger plan. What I didn't yet understand was what that plan was meant to accomplish or how long they'd been working toward it. The family meeting that Brenda called for Wednesday evening felt like walking into an ambush. She'd contacted everyone. Uncle Frank, my cousins Rachel and Brett, Aunt Linda, and even my grandmother Dorothy, who was wheeled in from her assisted living facility for the occasion. The living room of Brenda's house, where I'd spent countless childhood holidays, now felt like a courtroom where I was the defendant facing a jury that had already decided my guilt. Derek and Vanessa arrived together, with Vanessa carrying a thick folder that immediately caught my attention. Frank settled into his usual chair with the confidence of someone who knew he had allies, while my cousins arranged themselves on the couch like a unified front. The staging was theatrical, designed to make me feel isolated and outnumbered. Looking around that room, I realized with growing dread that none of these people were going to support Tyler or me. Brenda opened the proceedings with a tone that suggested this was an intervention rather than a discussion about child abuse. "Cassie, we're all here because we love you and Tyler, but we're worried about your state of mind. This whole situation has gotten out of hand, and we need to address some serious concerns about your parenting and your stability." The word stability hit like a slap. Here was my mother, the woman who'd locked my son in a basement for days, questioning my mental state to a room full of relatives who were nodding in agreement. The gaslighting was so complete, so coordinated, that for a moment I questioned my own perception of reality. Had I misunderstood what happened? Was I the problem? Uncle Frank took over the narrative, speaking with the authority that came from his 30 years in social services. "Cassie, honey, we've all been watching you struggle as a single mother for years. The long hours at work, the financial stress, the isolation from having no real partner support. It's taken a toll on your judgment. Tyler is a difficult child who requires structure and discipline that you're simply not providing. The characterization of Tyler as difficult infuriated me more than the personal attacks. Tyler was gentle, creative, and loving. His only crime was being 8 years old and occasionally needing attention, like any normal child. But Frank continued his assessment with clinical detachment. The boy has behavioral issues that stem from inconsistent parenting. What happened this weekend was an attempt to provide the structure he desperately needs. Vanessa opened her folder and began reading what she claimed were documented instances of my negligent parenting. According to her list, I was guilty of allowing Tyler to stay up past bedtime on weekends, letting him eat cereal for dinner when I was exhausted from double shifts, and failing to maintain strict disciplinary standards. Each infraction was presented as evidence of my unfitness as a mother, as if flexibility and compassion were character flaws. Derek's contribution was the most brutal. Face it, Cassie, you never wanted to be a mother. James saw it, and that's why he left. You're overwhelmed, you're angry, and you're taking it out on the family that's trying to help you. Tyler would be better off with people who can actually handle raising a child. The suggestion that Tyler would be better off without me revealed the true purpose of this gathering. This wasn't about addressing concerns. It was about laying the groundwork for taking my son away from me. The systematic nature of their arguments, the coordinated presentation of evidence, and their unanimous agreement suggested this plan had been in development for far longer than just the weekend I was away. My cousin Rachel, whom I'd considered one of my closest relatives, delivered what felt like the killing blow. We've all talked about this, and we think Tyler should stay with Mom and Derek for a while. Just until you get the help you need and can prove you're ready to be a real parent to him. The casual way she discussed separating me from my son, as if it were a reasonable solution to a problem they'd invented, left me speechless. When I tried to present the evidence of Tyler's abuse, showing them the photos of the basement and the security footage of the party, their response revealed the depth of their conspiracy. Brenda dismissed the basement as a timeout space that Tyler chose to dramatize, while Derek claimed the party was a family gathering that got a little loud. Frank, with his professional authority, suggested that my emotional instability was causing me to misinterpret normal disciplinary measures. The most chilling moment came when Grandmother Dorothy spoke up from her wheelchair. I'd expected support from the woman who'd sung me lullabies and helped raise me, but instead she said, "Cassandra, dear, you're just like your father was before he died. Too sensitive, too emotional, not strong enough for the real world. Tyler needs strength, not coddling." The comparison to my father, who'd struggled with depression before his death when I was 15, felt like a deliberate attempt to undermine my mental health. They were painting me as inherently unstable, using family history as a weapon to question my fitness as a mother. Every vulnerability I'd ever shared with these people was now being weaponized against me. As the meeting continued, I realized they'd already taken steps to implement their plan. Frank revealed he'd been in contact with Child Protective Services, filing reports about my concerning behavior and Tyler's welfare situation. Derek mentioned conversations with legal advisors about custody arrangements, while Vanessa discussed her research into appropriate therapeutic interventions for both Tyler and me. The systematic nature of their attack became clear when Rachel presented what she called witness statements from neighbors and Tyler's teachers about my parenting. These statements, which painted me as overwhelmed and inconsistent, had obviously been gathered over time. This wasn't a response to the weekend's events. It was the culmination of a long-term campaign to undermine my relationship with my son. When I asked why they were doing this, Uncle Frank's answer was delivered with the conviction of someone who believed he was performing a noble act, because Tyler deserves better than what you can give him. He deserves a stable home with 2 parents, proper discipline, and the kind of structure that builds character. Brenda and Derek can provide that. You cannot. The meeting ended with an ultimatum: cooperate with their family intervention plan, which included Tyler living with Brenda and Derek while I underwent counseling and parenting classes, or face a formal custody challenge backed by their collective testimony and Frank's professional assessment. They gave me until Friday to decide, presenting their destructive manipulation as someone had filed reports claiming I was involved in suspicious financial activity, providing detailed documentation of my spending patterns and suggesting possible drug purchases or gambling debts. The accusations were fabricated but sophisticated enough to trigger automatic bank security protocols. Without access to my money, I couldn't pay rent, buy groceries, or hire the attorney I desperately needed to protect Tyler. Digging deeper into this financial sabotage, I discovered that Uncle Frank's connections extended far beyond social services. His 30-year career had given him contacts throughout the local bureaucratic system, including people who could initiate investigations based on his professional concerns about a family situation. The bank hold wasn't random. It was orchestrated to leave me financially helpless just when I needed resources most. That afternoon, while Tyler was at school, I received a visit from Amanda Porter, a social worker I'd never met who claimed to be conducting a follow-up on the reports filed about Tyler's welfare. Her questions were leading and aggressive, designed to trap me into admitting inadequacy rather than genuinely assessing Tyler's well-being. "Mrs. Williams, can you explain why your family feels it necessary to intervene in your parenting? What specific behaviors have they observed that concern them?" The coordination between this official visit and my financial problems couldn't be coincidental. Someone had timed these attacks to hit me simultaneously, maximizing my vulnerability and limiting my options. When I tried to explain the abuse Tyler had suffered, Amanda's response revealed how thoroughly my family had prepared their narrative. "Mrs. Williams, I have multiple reports suggesting you may be experiencing stress-related delusions. Have you considered that your interpretation of recent events might be influenced by your mental state?" That evening, while helping Tyler with homework, I discovered another layer of their manipulation. Hidden in his backpack was a small recording device, sophisticated enough to capture our conversations, but simple enough that Tyler might not notice it. When I asked him where it came from, he said Uncle Derek had given it to him, explaining it was a special toy that would help Mommy feel better. The recording device revealed the extent of their surveillance and manipulation. They'd been gathering evidence of our private conversations, probably hoping to capture moments of frustration or vulnerability they could use against me. The violation felt profound. Not only had they tortured Tyler physically and psychologically, but they'd turned him into an unwitting spy in his own home. Searching Tyler's room more thoroughly, I found other evidence of their long-term manipulation. There were drawings he'd made showing himself with different families, prompted by questions about where he'd rather live or who made him feel safest. There were notes in Tyler's handwriting repeating phrases like, "Mommy works too much," and "I want a real daddy," clearly dictated by someone else and disguised as his own thoughts. The sophistication of their psychological manipulation of an 8-year-old child was staggering. They'd been planting seeds of doubt about our family for months, making Tyler question whether our life together was normal or healthy. Every time he'd spent weekends with Brenda or Derek, they'd been slowly poisoning his mind against me while gathering ammunition for their eventual attack. Friday morning brought the news I'd been dreading. Tyler's school had received anonymous reports about my unstable behavior and concerning parenting choices. The principal, Mrs. Henderson, called me in for a meeting where she explained that multiple sources had expressed worry about Tyler's home situation. These weren't reports from teachers who'd observed problems. They were anonymous tips that painted me as a threat to my own child's well-being. The timing was perfect from their perspective. With my bank account frozen, my family united against me, social services investigating based on false reports, and now Tyler's school questioning my fitness, I was under attack from every direction simultaneously. They created a comprehensive crisis designed to overwhelm my ability to respond effectively. That afternoon, Tyler came home from school with a story that chilled me to the bone. During recess, Uncle Frank had appeared at the school playground, claiming to be picking Tyler up for a special appointment that I'd supposedly authorized. Only the vigilance of Tyler's teacher, who insisted on calling me directly, had prevented what could have been a kidnapping attempt disguised as family intervention. Frank's presence at Tyler's school without my knowledge or permission revealed how far they were willing to go. This wasn't just about challenging my custody through official channels. They were prepared to take Tyler by force if necessary. The realization that I couldn't even trust his safety at school added a new level of terror to an already impossible situation. Reviewing everything that had happened, I began to see the bigger picture of their conspiracy. The weekend abuse hadn't been an isolated incident of poor judgment. It had been a test run for their larger plan. They'd wanted to see how Tyler would respond to separation from me, how I would react to his mistreatment, and whether they could successfully manipulate the narrative to make me appear unstable. The evidence of their long-term planning was everywhere once I knew to look for it. Derek's increased interest in Tyler over the past year, Brenda's subtle criticisms of my parenting that had gradually become more direct, Frank's casual questions about my work schedule and personal life, and Vanessa's sudden expertise in child development issues. They'd been preparing for this campaign for months, systematically gathering information and building their case while pretending to be supportive family members. The cruelest element was how they'd used Tyler's natural love and trust against both of us. They'd convinced him that his suffering was my fault, that his family's rejection was evidence of my inadequacy as a mother. An 8-year-old child had been turned into a weapon against his own parent, made to believe that the people torturing him were actually trying to save him from me. Saturday morning brought what felt like the final blow. Legal papers delivered to my door by a process server, initiating formal custody proceedings. Derek and Brenda were petitioning for emergency custody of Tyler based on allegations of neglect, abandonment, and mental instability. The petition included sworn statements from multiple family members, documentation from Frank's professional assessment, and even testimony from Tyler's father, James, whom I hadn't heard from in over 3 years. The inclusion of James in their legal strategy revealed the true scope of their conspiracy. Somehow, they tracked down Tyler's absent father and convinced him to join their custody challenge. According to the legal papers, James was now claiming he wanted to be part of Tyler's life and was concerned about the child's welfare under my care. The man who'd walked away from his son without a backward glance was now positioning himself as a concerned parent, backed by my family's resources and planning. Standing in my living room, holding legal papers that could destroy my life, while Tyler played innocently in the next room, I realized that everything I'd thought I knew about my family had been a lie. They weren't people who'd made terrible decisions in a moment of stress. They were predators who'd spent months planning to steal my child, using love and trust as weapons in a war I hadn't even known was being fought. Monday morning arrived with the sound of official knocking that no parent ever wants to hear. Through my front window, I could see the unmarked sedan that had become synonymous with my worst fears. Amanda Porter stood on my doorstep again, this time accompanied by a man she introduced as her supervisor and a police officer who remained silent but watchful. "Mrs. Williams, we're here for an emergency welfare assessment of Tyler. We need to inspect your home and speak with your son immediately." The timing wasn't coincidental. Tyler was getting ready for school, still in his pajamas and eating breakfast, when 3 strangers invaded our morning routine demanding to evaluate his safety. The psychological impact on an already traumatized child was devastating. Tyler began trembling the moment he saw the official badges, clearly remembering the basement and believing that his worst fears were coming true. "Mommy, are they here to take me away?" Tyler whispered, clinging to my leg with a desperation that broke my heart. His question, voiced in front of the social workers, was exactly the kind of evidence they'd come hoping to find. Amanda Porter made a note on her clipboard about Tyler's anxiety regarding parental separation, turning my son's trauma response into proof of an unhealthy home environment. The home inspection was designed to find problems regardless of reality. Every normal aspect of our life was scrutinized and found wanting. Tyler's toys scattered in the living room became evidence of lack of structure and organization. The breakfast dishes in the sink suggested poor housekeeping standards. The fact that Tyler slept in my bed when he had nightmares was documented as inappropriate sleeping arrangements that might indicate boundary issues. When they demanded to see Tyler's room, I watched Amanda Porter examine his drawings with particular attention. The pictures Tyler had made of our family, once innocent expressions of a child's love, were now being interpreted as evidence of psychological disturbance. A drawing of him and me holding hands became proof of excessive dependency, while another showing him crying was labeled as evidence of emotional distress in the home. The questioning of Tyler was the most brutal part of the inspection. Amanda Porter separated him from me, taking him into his room for what she called a private conversation, where he could speak freely without parental influence. Through the thin walls, I could hear fragments of leading questions. Tyler, do you ever feel scared at home? Has Mommy ever left you alone? Do you think Grandma's house would be a safer place for you? Tyler's responses, filtered through the wall and my own terror, seemed to contradict everything I believed about our relationship. I heard him say yes to questions I couldn't quite make out, heard him mention being scared and wanting to go to Grandma's house. Only later would I understand that his answers were being manipulated by the way the questions were phrased, that a scared 8-year-old would agree to anything that might make the interrogation stop. 20 minutes into Tyler's questioning, I heard something that made my blood freeze, the sound of my son having a complete panic attack. His breathing became rapid and shallow, and I could hear him hyperventilating while crying, "I want my mommy. I want my mommy." When I tried to go to him, the police officer blocked my path, explaining that interfering with an official investigation could result in my arrest. Listening to Tyler's panic attack from outside his bedroom door, prevented from comforting my terrified child by people who claimed to be protecting him, remains one of the most helpless moments of my life. The social workers eventually allowed me to enter when it became clear that Tyler's distress was escalating beyond their ability to manage, but the damage was done. My son looked at me with eyes full of confusion and terror, no longer sure who was safe and who was a threat. The timing of what happened next revealed the coordination between my family and the social services investigation. Just as Amanda Porter was concluding her assessment, Brenda arrived at my front door with Derek close behind. They claimed to have heard about the situation and wanted to offer their support, but their arrival was too perfectly timed to be coincidental. Someone had told them exactly when to appear to maximize their impact on the official proceedings. Brenda's performance for the social workers was masterful in its manipulation. She presented herself as the concerned grandmother who'd been trying to help a struggling daughter cope with single parenthood. "Cassie's been under so much stress," she told Amanda Porter with just the right amount of worry in her voice. "We've all been concerned about Tyler's well-being for months. The poor child has been acting out, having nightmares, asking to stay at our house instead of going home." Derek's contribution was equally calculated. He provided Amanda Porter with what he called documentation of concerning incidents, times when I'd called him or Brenda for childcare help, occasions when Tyler had seemed upset after spending time with me, and his own professional observations as someone who worked in child advocacy. The fact that Derek's job was actually in insurance sales didn't prevent him from speaking with authority about child welfare issues. The social worker's response to my family's support revealed how effectively the narrative had been crafted. Instead of questioning why relatives would undermine a mother during an official investigation, Amanda Porter seemed to view their presence as confirmation of the concerns that had triggered the assessment. "It's encouraging to see that Tyler has family members who are willing to step up if needed," she noted, while documenting their offer to provide alternative placement if I was deemed unfit. As the morning progressed, I watched my family systematically destroy any chance I had of maintaining custody of Tyler. They provided the social workers with additional evidence I hadn't known existed. Recordings of phone conversations where I'd expressed frustration about single parenthood, photos they claimed showed Tyler looking unhappy during family gatherings, and even medical records they'd somehow obtained showing the times I'd taken Tyler to the emergency room for normal childhood injuries. The medical records were particularly damaging because they were taken completely out of context. A visit for Tyler's broken arm after a playground accident became evidence of inadequate supervision. Emergency room treatment for a severe case of flu was presented as proof that I'd neglected his health until crisis intervention was necessary. Normal parenting challenges were being reframed as evidence of neglect and incompetence. By noon, Amanda Porter was ready to deliver her preliminary assessment. Tyler would be placed in protective custody pending a full investigation, with temporary placement going to his grandmother Brenda as the most stable and appropriate family option. The speed with which this decision was reached, combined with the perfect timing of my family's involvement, proved that this outcome had been orchestrated long before the morning's inspection began. The moment when they told Tyler he would be leaving with Brenda remains seared in my memory. My son looked between me and his grandmother with complete confusion, unable to understand why the people who'd hurt him were now being presented as his rescuers. "But I want to stay with Mommy," he said in a small voice that carried no weight in the face of official authority and family manipulation. Watching Brenda pack Tyler's clothes while he sat on his bed crying silently was a special kind of torture. She moved through his room with the efficiency of someone who'd planned for this moment, selecting his favorite toys and clothes with an intimacy that reminded everyone present of her grandmotherly role. To the social workers, she appeared to be a loving relative stepping in during a crisis. To me, she was a predator claiming her prize. The final cruelty came as Tyler was being led to Brenda's car. Derek approached me with what he probably thought was a conciliatory tone. "This is temporary, Cassie. Get the help you need, prove you're ready to be a real mother, and maybe we can work something out." His words revealed the ultimate goal, not just taking Tyler away, but making me grateful for whatever scraps of access they might eventually allow. As I stood in my doorway watching my son disappear into the car with the people who tortured him, I felt something break inside me that I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. But underneath the devastation, a cold anger was beginning to form. They'd won this battle through manipulation, lies, and exploitation of systems designed to protect children. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The first 48 hours after Tyler was taken from me passed in a blur of desperate phone calls, frantic research, and the kind of bone-deep grief that comes from having your child ripped away by people who claim to love them. I barely ate, couldn't sleep, and found myself walking into Tyler's room every few hours just to stare at his empty bed and remember what it felt like when our life made sense. Wednesday evening brought an unexpected knock at my door that would change everything. My sister Maya stood on my doorstep with tears in her eyes and a cardboard box in her hands. I hadn't seen Maya in over 6 months, since she'd moved to Portland for her job with an environmental consulting firm, but her presence felt like the first ray of hope I'd experienced since this nightmare began. "Cassie, I came as soon as I heard," she said, setting down the box and wrapping me in a hug that felt like coming home. "And I brought something you need to hear." Maya had always been the family member I felt closest to, but her distance from the local family drama had kept her out of recent events. What I didn't know was that Brenda had been calling her regularly, feeding her a carefully crafted version of events designed to gain her support for the custody change. The box Maya carried contained something that would prove to be the key to everything, a collection of small recording devices she'd hidden during family gatherings over the past year. Maya worked in environmental compliance, which had made her naturally suspicious of the coordinated story she'd been hearing from Brenda. "Something didn't add up," she explained. "The whole family suddenly agreeing that you were an unfit mother? It felt orchestrated, so I started documenting the conversations." The recordings Maya had captured were devastating evidence of the conspiracy against Tyler and me. Hidden in her purse during family dinners and holiday gatherings, her small recorder had captured hours of planning sessions where Derek, Brenda, and Frank discussed strategies for undermining my custody and taking control of Tyler's life. Their casual discussion of tactics for psychological manipulation and legal maneuvering was chilling in its calculated cruelty. One recording from Thanksgiving dinner was particularly damning. Frank could be heard explaining how his connections in social services could be leveraged to create a paper trail of concerns about my parenting. "The key is documentation," he said between bites of turkey. "We need official reports that establish a pattern of problems. Amanda Porter owes me favors from the Henderson case, and she'll write whatever assessment we need." Derek's voice on another recording revealed the financial motivations behind their scheme. "The trust fund Dad set up for Tyler is substantial, and as his guardian, we'll have control over those decisions. Plus, with Cassie out of the picture, There's the life insurance benefit from James's military service that Tyler's entitled to. We're talking about serious money here, enough to make this whole thing worthwhile. The mention of money I didn't even know existed explained so much about their motivation. My father had apparently established a trust fund for Tyler before his death, and Tyler was entitled to military benefits through James that I'd never been informed about. Derek and Brenda weren't just trying to take my son. They were stealing his financial future as well. Maya's recordings also revealed how long they'd been planning this assault. References to conversations from over a year ago showed they'd been laying groundwork for months, possibly even before the weekend conference that triggered their final attack. "We need to make it look like Cassie's been falling apart gradually," Brenda's voice explained on one tape. "If it seems sudden, people will get suspicious. But if we can document a slow decline, it'll seem natural when we have to step in." Armed with this evidence, Maya helped me contact Linda Morrison, an attorney who specialized in family law and had a reputation for fighting dirty cases. Linda's initial consultation was sobering but hopeful. "This is one of the most sophisticated custody manipulation cases I've seen," she said after listening to Maya's recordings. "But the evidence is strong enough to not only get Tyler back, but potentially pursue criminal charges against everyone involved." Linda's first step was to file an emergency motion challenging Tyler's placement with Brenda. The recordings provided clear evidence that his removal had been based on false information and fraudulent manipulation of the system. "We're going to expose this conspiracy in court," Linda explained, "and show that Tyler was removed from a loving home and placed with his actual abusers." While Linda began preparing our legal counterattack, I reached out to my neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who had become increasingly concerned about Tyler's absence. Her security footage had captured more than just the party weekend. It had documented months of suspicious activity around my house. Derek's car had been parked on my street at odd hours, Frank had been seen taking photos of my property, and there were multiple instances of people examining my mail and trash. Mrs. Patterson's footage revealed a level of surveillance that bordered on stalking. For months, my family had been monitoring my daily routines, documenting my work schedule, and even tracking Tyler's activities. "I thought they were just being involved grandparents," Mrs. Patterson said as we reviewed the footage together. "But looking at it now, it seems more like they were building a case against you." The breakthrough came when Maya discovered that Derek's work computer had been used to research custody laws, parental rights termination procedures, and strategies for proving parental unfitness. His search history, which Maya accessed through her knowledge of his passwords from family tech support sessions, revealed months of preparation for legal action against me. More damning, it showed he'd been in contact with Tyler's absent father James far longer than they'd admitted. Tyler's therapist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, proved to be another crucial ally when Linda arranged for an independent evaluation of his emotional state. Dr. Martinez had been treating Tyler since the basement incident and had documented clear evidence of trauma consistent with abuse and psychological manipulation. Tyler's fear responses and dissociation patterns are classic indicators of systematic psychological abuse, she testified in her preliminary report. His trauma is not consistent with neglect by a loving parent, but rather with deliberate manipulation by trusted authority figures. The most important breakthrough came when Dr. Martinez was able to help Tyler feel safe enough to provide clear testimony about what had happened during the basement incident and the months leading up to it. In a child-friendly interview setting, Tyler revealed details about the systematic way Derek, Brenda, and Frank had been poisoning his mind against me. "They said Mommy didn't love me anymore and was going to give me away," he explained to Dr. Martinez. "They said I had to choose between Mommy and having a real family." Tyler's account of the psychological manipulation was heartbreaking in its detail. They'd shown him photos of happy families and asked why his family didn't look like that. They'd convinced him that single mothers couldn't really love their children the way complete families could. Most cruelly, they'd used his natural longing for a father figure to make him feel ashamed of our life together. As the evidence mounted, Linda began building a case that would not only return Tyler to me, but ensure that Derek, Brenda, and Frank faced serious consequences for their actions. We're looking at potential charges including kidnapping, child abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and manipulation of government services, she explained. These people didn't just hurt your family. They corrupted systems designed to protect children. The support network that began forming around us included other families who'd been victimized by Frank's abuse of his position in social services. Linda's investigation had uncovered a pattern of cases where Frank had used his professional authority to manipulate custody situations for personal gain. We weren't his first victims. We were part of a system of corruption that had been operating for years. By Friday of that week, we had assembled enough evidence to file formal complaints with the State Social Services Department, the District Attorney's Office, and the Family Court. The recordings, security footage, medical evaluations, and Tyler's testimony painted a clear picture of a conspiracy to defraud the system and steal a child from his loving mother. But more importantly, we had hope for the first time since this nightmare began. The following Monday marked the beginning of our systematic dismantling of the conspiracy that had stolen my son. Linda Morrison had spent the weekend preparing a legal assault that would hit Derek, Brenda, and Frank from multiple directions simultaneously. We're not just playing defense anymore, she explained as she laid out our strategy. We're going to destroy their credibility so thoroughly that they'll never be able to hurt another family. Our first target was Frank's corruption of the social services system. Linda had discovered that Amanda Porter, the social worker who'd removed Tyler from my home, had a long history of questionable decisions in cases where Frank had provided professional input. Together, they'd manipulated at least 6 other custody situations over the past 3 years, always resulting in children being removed from loving homes and placed with relatives who had financial or personal motivations for seeking custody. The evidence against Frank was overwhelming once we knew where to look. His personnel file, obtained through legal discovery, showed multiple complaints about bias and inappropriate involvement in cases outside his jurisdiction. His financial records revealed unexplained deposits that coincided with custody decisions he'd influenced. Most damning, his personal phone records showed extensive communication with Derek and Brenda during the weeks leading up to Tyler's removal, proving their coordination. Maya's technical skills proved invaluable in exposing Derek's digital trail of deception. His work computer search history revealed not only his research into custody manipulation tactics, but also his correspondence with a private investigator who'd been gathering information about my personal life for months. Derek had paid someone to follow me, photograph my daily routines, and even interview neighbors about my parenting under the guise of a background check for a potential job opportunity. The private investigator's files, subpoenaed by Linda, contained a treasure trove of fabricated evidence. Photos of me looking tired after double shifts at the hospital were captioned as evidence of substance abuse or mental instability. Images of Tyler playing alone in our yard became proof of inadequate supervision. Even my attendance at Tyler's school events had been documented and twisted into evidence of obsessive behavior and inability to maintain appropriate boundaries. Brenda's lies began unraveling when Linda's investigation revealed the financial motivations behind the conspiracy. The trust fund Derek had mentioned in Maya's recordings was worth over $300,000, with annual distributions that would continue until Tyler reached 25. As Tyler's guardian, Brenda would have complete control over these funds, essentially giving her access to a substantial income stream for the next 17 years. The military benefits Tyler was entitled to through his father James were even more significant. James had been disabled in military service, making Tyler eligible for educational benefits, healthcare coverage, and monthly support payments that Derek and Brenda had never informed me about. By taking custody of Tyler, they would control access to benefits worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over his lifetime. Linda's investigation also revealed that James's sudden interest in Tyler's welfare was far from voluntary. Derek had tracked him down through military records and presented him with a carefully crafted story about my mental breakdown and Tyler's need for masculine influence. More importantly, Derek had offered James a financial arrangement where he would receive a portion of Tyler's military benefits in exchange for supporting the custody challenge. The corruption extended beyond just Frank's involvement. Amanda Porter's assessment of my home had been based on a pre-written template that she'd used in multiple cases, simply filling in specific details to match each situation. Her questions during Tyler's interview had been designed to elicit specific responses that would support a predetermined conclusion. The entire social services investigation had been a performance designed to justify a decision that had already been made. As news of our counteroffensive spread through the family network, cracks began appearing in their unified front. Vanessa, Derek's wife, was the first to break. Faced with the possibility of criminal charges and the destruction of Derek's career, she contacted Linda through an intermediary to discuss what she knew about the conspiracy. Her cooperation would prove devastating to Derek's defense. Vanessa revealed that Derek's hatred of me went back years, rooted in jealousy over the attention Tyler received from family members and resentment about the financial responsibilities that came with my single parenthood. Derek always said Tyler got more attention and support than our kids did, Vanessa explained in her sworn statement. He felt like the family was spending money on you and Tyler that should have been shared equally among all the grandchildren. More damaging was Vanessa's testimony about the planning sessions that had taken place in their home. Derek had organized regular meetings where he, Brenda, and Frank discussed strategies for undermining my custody and gaining control of Tyler's financial assets. Vanessa had recordings of some of these meetings on her phone, providing additional evidence of premeditation and conspiracy. The most shocking revelation from Vanessa concerned Tyler's father, James. Derek hadn't just tracked James down and convinced him to support their custody challenge. He'd been in contact with James for over 2 years, gradually building a relationship and feeding him negative information about me and Tyler's life. The goal had been to eventually bring James back into Tyler's life as a way to challenge my custody, with Derek positioning himself as the broker of this reunion.
Dr.
Martinez's continued work with Tyler provided increasingly clear evidence of the psychological abuse he'd suffered. Tyler's recovery was remarkable once he was removed from the ongoing manipulation, and his growing ability to articulate what had been done to him was powerful testimony. They told me secrets about Mommy, he explained to Dr. Martinez. They said if I loved them, I wouldn't tell Mommy about the mean things they said about her. The systematic nature of Tyler's psychological conditioning became clear as Dr. Martinez helped him process his experiences. Derek, Brenda, and Frank had used classic manipulation tactics: isolation, alternating punishment and reward, and the creation of dependency relationships. They'd convinced Tyler that his love for me was somehow wrong or harmful, while positioning themselves as his real family. As our evidence mounted, the State Social Services Department launched a formal investigation into Frank's conduct and Amanda Porter's pattern of questionable decisions. The district attorney's office opened a criminal investigation into conspiracy, fraud, and child endangerment charges. Most importantly, the family court agreed to an emergency hearing to review Tyler's placement and consider our motion for his immediate return. The turning point came when Mrs. Patterson's security footage revealed something we'd missed in our initial review: clear evidence that Derek and Frank had been inside my house during the weekend I was away, not just at the party, but actually in my personal living spaces. Timestamps showed them entering and leaving my home multiple times, apparently planting evidence and gathering personal items that would later be used to support their claims about my instability. Linda's presentation of this evidence to the court was devastating. Your Honor, we have clear documentation that the defendants broke into Mrs. Williams's home, planted evidence, violated her privacy, and then used the fruits of their criminal activity to justify taking her child. This isn't a custody dispute. It's a criminal conspiracy that has traumatized a child and destroyed a family for financial gain. By the end of that week, the momentum had shifted completely in our favor. Derek's employer had placed him on administrative leave pending the criminal investigation. Frank had been suspended from his position with social services. Amanda Porter was under review by her supervisors. Most importantly, the court had scheduled an emergency custody hearing for the following Monday, with a strong indication that Tyler would be returned to my care pending the resolution of the criminal charges. The emergency custody hearing on Monday morning felt like stepping into a courtroom drama where truth was finally getting its day in court. Judge Patricia Hoffman had reviewed all our evidence over the weekend, and her expression as the proceedings began suggested she was as horrified by the conspiracy as we were. This case represents one of the most serious abuses of the family court system I've encountered in 23 years on the bench, she announced before hearing testimony began. Linda Morrison's opening statement laid out the full scope of the conspiracy with devastating clarity. Your Honor, Tyler Williams was not removed from an unfit home. He was kidnapped by relatives who manipulated government services, fabricated evidence, and psychologically tortured an 8-year-old child as part of an elaborate scheme to steal his inheritance and claim control of his life. Tyler's testimony, conducted in Judge Hoffman's chambers with Dr. Martinez present to provide support, was the most powerful evidence of all. Speaking in his own words, my son described the systematic way his grandmother, uncle, and great-uncle had convinced him that I didn't love him and planned to abandon him. They said Mommy was pretending to love me but really wanted to give me away to strangers, Tyler explained, his voice steady but sad. They said if I was a good boy and lived with Grandma, maybe Mommy would visit me sometimes. The judge's questioning of Tyler was gentle but thorough, and his answers revealed the sophisticated nature of the psychological manipulation he'd endured. Derek, Brenda, and Frank had spent months conditioning Tyler to believe that their eventual custody takeover was actually a rescue mission. They'd convinced him that his fear of separation from me was evidence of an unhealthy attachment that needed to be broken for his own good. Derek's attorney attempted to portray the custody challenge as a legitimate intervention by concerned family members, but the evidence made this defense impossible to maintain. The recordings Maya had captured, combined with the financial documents Linda had discovered, painted a clear picture of premeditated fraud. When Derek took the stand, his inability to explain the coordination between his actions and Frank's official recommendations destroyed any credibility he might have had. Frank's testimony was equally damaging to their case. Faced with evidence of his systematic corruption of the social services system, he attempted to claim he was only trying to help Tyler by ensuring he had proper supervision. However, Linda's cross-examination revealed that Frank had received payments from Derek totaling over $15,000 in the months leading up to Tyler's removal, money that Derek had claimed was for consulting services but which clearly constituted bribes for official favors. The revelation about Tyler's trust fund and military benefits provided the motive that made sense of their elaborate scheme. Brenda's testimony revealed the depth of her entitlement when she actually argued that she deserved control of Tyler's financial assets because Cassie doesn't understand how to manage money properly. Her casual assumption that Tyler's inheritance was rightfully hers showed a mindset that viewed my son as property rather than a person. Amanda Porter's appearance as a witness was professionally devastating for her, but crucial for our case. Under oath, she admitted that her assessment of my home and Tyler's welfare had been influenced by Frank's professional recommendations rather than her own observations. She acknowledged that many of her conclusions had been predetermined and that she'd failed to investigate the sources of the allegations against me. The most shocking revelation came when Linda presented evidence that Derek had been systematically stealing from Tyler's trust fund for over a year. As the child's uncle, Derek had convinced the trust administrators that he needed to make emergency withdrawals for Tyler's welfare, claiming medical expenses and educational needs that were completely fabricated. Over $20,000 had been stolen before their custody grab even began. Judge Hoffman's reaction to this evidence was swift and decisive. Mr. Derek Williams, you stand accused not only of manipulating the custody system but of stealing from your own nephew's inheritance. This court finds the evidence of criminal activity overwhelming and will be referring this matter to the district attorney immediately. Vanessa's testimony proved to be the final nail in Derek's defense. Her detailed account of the planning sessions in their home, combined with the recordings she'd made, provided irrefutable evidence of conspiracy and premeditation. Most damaging was her revelation that Derek had bragged about his ability to work the system, and had promised that once they had control of Tyler, I would never see my son again. The hearing's conclusion was everything I'd hoped for, but barely dared to expect. Judge Huffman ordered Tyler's immediate return to my custody, declared that Derek, Brenda, and Frank were to have no contact with Tyler pending criminal proceedings, and ordered the immediate restoration of Tyler's stolen trust fund assets with interest and penalties. This child has been victimized by the very people who should have protected him, the judge stated. This court will not allow such manipulation to stand. Tyler's return to my arms that afternoon was a moment of pure joy mixed with heartbreak for all he'd endured. He clung to me with the desperation of a child who'd been convinced he might never see his mother again, whispering, "I knew you'd come for me, Mommy. I knew you wouldn't leave me with them forever." His faith in our love had survived their psychological torture, and that resilience would be the foundation of his healing. The criminal trial that followed was swift and decisive. Derek was sentenced to 2 years in prison for conspiracy, fraud, theft, and child endangerment. Brenda received 18 months for her role in the conspiracy and psychological abuse of Tyler. Frank faced the harshest sentence of 3 years, plus the loss of his pension and permanent banishment from any government employment for his corruption of the social services system. Amanda Porter was fired from her position and faced professional sanctions that would prevent her from ever working in child services again. The investigation into her cases resulted in reviews of dozens of custody decisions she'd influenced, leading to several other children being returned to wrongfully separated parents. James, Tyler's father, faced lesser charges as a cooperating witness, but his involvement in the conspiracy meant any chance of legitimate contact with Tyler was permanently severed. Tyler expressed no interest in meeting the father who tried to use him as a pawn in someone else's scheme, and I supported his decision completely. The financial recovery was substantial, but secondary to having Tyler home safe. The stolen trust fund money was returned with interest, and we received a settlement from the county for their employees' misconduct. More importantly, the court established a new trust structure that prevented anyone else from ever accessing Tyler's inheritance without my explicit consent and independent oversight. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new home in Portland, watching Tyler laugh with his new friend Marcus while they worked on a school science project at our dining table. The sound of his genuine, carefree laughter was something I'd thought I might never hear again, but with time, therapy, and distance from the people who'd hurt us, Tyler's natural joy had gradually returned. The decision to move had been difficult, but necessary. Too many memories haunted our old house, and Tyler needed space to heal without the constant reminder of family members who'd betrayed us. Maya's presence in Portland made the transition easier, and Tyler had thrived in his new school where no one knew our history or viewed him as the victim of a custody scandal. Dr. Martinez had continued Tyler's therapy through video sessions until we'd found an excellent child psychologist in Portland who specialized in family trauma recovery. Tyler's progress had been remarkable once he understood that the lies his relatives had told him weren't true. The nightmares had gradually faded, replaced by normal 8-year-old dreams about soccer games and birthday parties. "Mommy, can Marcus stay for dinner?" Tyler called out, his voice bright with the confidence that had slowly rebuilt itself as he learned to trust again. The fact that he could form new friendships, that he no longer flinched when adults spoke to him with authority, that he'd stopped asking me to promise I wouldn't leave him, these were the real victories of our recovery. The legal aftermath had continued for months beyond the criminal trials. Civil suits against Derek, Brenda, and Frank had resulted in additional financial compensation for Tyler's therapy and our relocation expenses. More importantly, the systemic changes that resulted from exposing their corruption meant other families would be protected from similar abuse of the family court system. Frank's corruption had been more extensive than even we'd realized. The investigation triggered by our case had uncovered a network of social workers, attorneys, and court officials who'd been manipulating custody decisions for financial gain. Over 30 cases were reviewed, resulting in multiple children being returned to wrongfully separated parents and several more officials facing criminal charges. Maya had become more than just my sister during this ordeal. She'd become Tyler's unofficial second mother and my closest ally. Her decision to relocate her environmental consulting business to Portland had given us the extended family support Tyler needed while ensuring he was surrounded by people who genuinely loved him. You know what I love most about this new life? Tyler had said to Maya just last week. Nobody here is pretending to be nice to get something from us. The relationship I'd begun with Michael Chin, a nurse practitioner at Portland Children's Hospital, had developed slowly and carefully with Tyler's well-being as the primary consideration. Michael understood that Tyler needed to feel secure in our family unit before accepting any additional adults into our lives. When Tyler had finally asked if Michael could teach him to play chess, I knew we'd reached a milestone in his ability to trust again. Tyler's therapy had revealed the full extent of the psychological manipulation he'd endured, but also his remarkable resilience. Children are often more capable of healing from trauma than adults realize when they're given proper support and honest answers to their questions. Tyler now understood that the cruel things Derek, Brenda, and Frank had done weren't his fault and had nothing to do with his worth as a person. The trust fund that had been the catalyst for so much pain had been restructured to ensure Tyler's financial security while preventing anyone from ever exploiting it again. A portion of the money was designated for his college education, another portion for therapy and medical care, and the rest would be available to him when he turned 25. More importantly, Tyler understood that this money belonged to him and that no one would ever be allowed to use it against him again. Our new life in Portland had given us both the fresh start we needed. Tyler was excelling in school, had joined a soccer team where he was learning teamwork and gaining confidence, and was considering taking guitar lessons because music helps people feel better when they're sad. His empathy and emotional intelligence, refined through surviving trauma, would serve him well throughout his life. The legal victories had been satisfying, but the real victory was watching Tyler grow into himself again. He still had questions about why his family had treated us so badly, and I answered them honestly while emphasizing that their behavior reflected their character problems, not any deficiency in him. Some people think love means controlling others, I'd explained. But real love means wanting someone to be happy and free. Last month, Tyler had surprised me by asking if we could visit his father's grave. Not James, who was alive but permanently out of our lives, but my father, Tyler's grandfather who died when Tyler was young. I want to tell Grandpa about our new life, Tyler had said. I think he would be proud that we didn't let the mean people win. Standing at my father's gravestone, listening to Tyler tell him about his new school and friends, I realized how completely my son had reclaimed his narrative from those who'd tried to rewrite it. The court case had received local media attention, leading to interview requests and offers to write a book about our experience. While I declined most of these opportunities, I had agreed to speak at a conference for family court professionals about recognizing signs of custody manipulation. Tyler had supported this decision, saying he hoped our story might help other kids who were being lied to by adults they trusted. Our old neighbors, including Mrs. Patterson, had kept in touch and provided updates on the aftermath of the criminal trials. Derek had served his full sentence and been released, but his reputation in the community was permanently destroyed. Brenda had moved to Florida to live with a distant relative, unable to face the shame of her actions becoming public knowledge. Frank had lost everything, his job, his pension, his standing in the community, and served as a cautionary tale for other officials who might be tempted to abuse their positions. Tyler's relationship with the concept of family had evolved in healthy ways. He understood that being related to someone didn't automatically make them trustworthy, but he also learned that chosen family could be just as meaningful as biological connections. Maya, Michael, Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Martinez, and several of our new Portland friends had become his extended family, people who'd earned his trust through consistent kindness and reliability. As I tucked Tyler into bed that night, he looked up at me with the clear, trusting eyes of a child who felt secure in his world again. "Mommy, I'm glad those people aren't our family anymore," he said matter-of-factly. "Our real family is much better." His ability to distinguish between people who claimed to love him and people who actually demonstrated love through their actions was perhaps the most valuable lesson he'd learned from our ordeal. "You know what the best part of our new life is, sweetheart?" I asked, smoothing his hair as his eyes grew heavy with sleep. "What, Mommy?" "We get to choose who we love and who we trust. And we never have to pretend that people who hurt us deserve our loyalty just because they share our DNA." Tyler smiled sleepily and whispered, "I choose you, Mommy. Always." As I turned off his bedroom light and listened to his peaceful breathing, I reflected on how far we'd traveled from that terrible day when I'd found him locked in a basement by people who were supposed to protect him. We'd survived the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable of recognizing genuine love when we found it. The scars would always be there, reminders of what we'd endured and overcome. But they were also proof of our resilience, evidence that love and truth could triumph over manipulation and greed when people were willing to fight for what mattered most. Tyler was safe, happy, and free to become whoever he was meant to be, surrounded by people who celebrated his authentic self rather than trying to control or exploit him. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are those who should protect us, but surviving their betrayal teaches us that real strength comes from within, that genuine love never requires us to diminish ourselves, and that the families we choose can be more loyal than the ones we're born into. Tyler and I had learned these lessons the hardest possible way, but they would serve us well for the rest of our lives together. Have you ever experienced betrayal from family members who were supposed to protect you? How do you think you would have handled discovering your child in the situation Tyler faced? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this video if Tyler's story of resilience touched your heart, and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family manipulation and finding strength in the darkest moments. Share this video with anyone who needs to know that it's possible to survive even the worst betrayals and build a better life on the other side. Thank you for listening to our story, and remember that no matter how dark things seem, there are always people willing to help when you're brave enough to speak your truth. May your families be filled with genuine love, honest communication, and the kind of trust that never needs to be questioned.